Melanie found herself utterly adrift, her mind awash with confusion and panic. She paced the room with increasing urgency, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the ground beneath her feet might give way. The wedding dress she wore seemed to cling to her like a shroud of anxiety, its weight pressing down on her already overwhelmed spirit. Every lace and bead felt like a tiny, mocking reminder of the joyous day that was rapidly unraveling into chaos. The true source of her distress, however, was not the dress, but the glaring absence of the groom. With only 15 precious minutes left before their marriage registration, the clock's relentless ticking seemed to echo her rising dread. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Outside the registry office, a crowd of guests had gathered, their faces a tapestry of curiosity and concern. Melanie felt their collective gaze like a spotlight, amplifying her pressure to maintain composure. It was a Herculean effort to keep her emotions in check, each passing moment testing her resolve. Her friends, their feet aching from the prolonged wait in high heels and their patience worn thin, were desperate for the festivities to begin. They longed to capture the joyous moments, to flood social media with stories and snapshots of the day, but the delay gnawed at their excitement. The photographers, entrusted with immortalizing the ceremony, mirrored Melanie's turmoil. They flitted about nervously, their questions punctuating the tense air. Is everything all right? Has anyone heard from Adrian? Each inquiry only deepened Melanie's despair. Time, which had once felt like a dependable ally, now betrayed her. Adrian's continued absence turned seconds into eternities. The expressions on Vanessa and Nicholas's faces grew increasingly puzzled, reflecting the crowd's growing unease. How could someone be late to their wedding? The absurdity of the situation only heightened the surreal atmosphere. Melanie's mother, her patience finally frayed by the agonizing wait, broke the silence. Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of her frustration and disappointment. The initial spark of excitement that had filled the air now felt like a distant memory, replaced by a heavy pall of uncertainty. And then, just as hope seemed to be fading, an old Buick, as aged and weathered as Melanie herself, pulled up to the registry office. The guests turned as one, their surprise palpable, as a young man stepped out of the car. His attire was startlingly simple, a modest trouser suit, far removed from the expected elegance of a groom. In his hands, he held a small bouquet of 3 chrysanthemums, their humble beauty contrasting sharply with the grandeur of the occasion. 2 figures, slightly younger than Melanie's parents, emerged from the car as well. Their clothing, reminiscent of a bygone era, added to the air of mystery. Unfazed by the murmurs of the crowd, they began to climb the steps with an air of quiet confidence. "Oh, what an intriguing costume wedding!" one of Melanie's guests exclaimed, trying to inject some levity into the bewildering scene. The young man approached Melanie, his eyes filled with a blend of apology and affection. He handed her the bouquet, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. "Hi, darling, please excuse my lateness," he said, his voice a soothing balm to Melanie's frayed nerves. The crowd fell silent, their curiosity piqued as they leaned in to catch every word. "Adrian, what is this? Please explain. Is this some kind of elaborate surprise?" Melanie's voice trembled, her corset feeling tighter with each breath. "My love, calm down. This is not a surprise, whether good or bad. It's just the unvarnished truth of life. I fell so deeply in love with you that I couldn't bring myself to tell you the whole truth right away. I'm not wealthy. My parents are humble workers. And I am just a taxi driver who wants nothing more than to be your devoted husband." Melanie's face flushed with a mix of anger and disbelief. Her mind raced as she tried to process his words. "Adrian, how can you make a mockery of me like this? Is this some kind of hidden camera prank, a test to see if I would still marry a poor, unfortunate man?" Her voice wavered between rage and hurt. "Melanie, wait, There's no trick here. No hidden cameras. You professed your love for me just yesterday. Has your perception of me changed so drastically in such a short time? Adrian's plea was filled with genuine emotion, his eyes searching hers for understanding. Stop this charade, Adrian. What kind of spectacle have you concocted here? Did you plan to completely humiliate me? Well, congratulations, you've succeeded. How did I not see through your deceit from the beginning? Melanie's words were sharp, her pain evident. She felt betrayed and exposed, as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Adrian took a step closer, his expression earnest. Melanie, please listen. My intentions were never to deceive you or cause you pain. I love you more than anything, and I wanted to start our life together on a foundation of truth. My love for you is genuine, and I hope you can see that. But Melanie's world had already crumbled. The fairy tale she had envisioned had been replaced by a harsh reality she was not prepared for. As she stood there, clutching the bouquet, she felt the weight of expectations, dreams, and societal pressures crashing down around her. The day that was supposed to mark the beginning of a new chapter now felt like an insurmountable obstacle. The guests watched in stunned silence, their earlier excitement now replaced with a mix of sympathy and shock. They had come to celebrate love, but now they bore witness to its trials and tribulations. Melanie's heart ached, torn between the love she felt for Adrian and the betrayal she couldn't quite shake. She wondered if she could ever reconcile the two, or if this day would forever mark a turning point she could never return from. No circus here, Adrian's voice took on a serious, almost pleading tone. Remember the boat ride we took together? You told me you wanted to spend the rest of your life with me. And what about the time at the cafe? I gave you an expensive watch as a gift. Every penny for that came from my honest, hard-earned money. I knew you wanted a grand wedding. So I even took out a loan to make it happen. Melanie covered her face with trembling hands, tears streaming down silently. The day she had envisioned as the happiest of her life was unraveling into a nightmare. She had believed she had found a considerate, gentle, and wealthy young man. She painted her future in bright, vibrant colors, so much so that she started to neglect her studies, assuming she wouldn't need to find a job immediately after graduation, despite her parents' constant urging. Adrian's financial status had never raised any doubts. He was always impeccably dressed, drove an expensive car, and owned a flat in the city's most prestigious area. Melanie didn't think she had won the lottery. She believed this was her rightful place. Coming from a well-to-do family herself and being quite attractive, it seemed only natural to choose a partner who matched her status. When Adrian tried to comfort her with a gentle embrace, she pushed him away, her anger flaring. How could you do this to me? How could you humiliate me in front of all my family and friends on such a day? There will be no wedding, she declared, her voice laced with bitterness. Turning her back to the guests, she walked away, her pride and dreams shattered. The stunned parents of both the bride and groom looked at each other, at a loss for what to do. One of Melanie's friends discreetly pulled out her phone, capturing the dramatic turn of events. The guests stood frozen, as if part of a surreal tableau. Melanie's father was the first to break the silence. Daughter, come back. Everything is fine. Anything can be worked out between a bride and groom, but Melanie, no longer hiding her despair, burst into tears and ran down the sidewalk. Vanessa chased after her daughter, while Nicholas sank onto the registry office steps, his head in his hands. All eyes turned to Adrian, who was now the center of everyone's attention. With a heavy heart, Adrian handed the bouquet of chrysanthemums to his parents and sat down next to Nicholas. How will you explain all of this? Nicholas asked, his gaze piercing Adrian's. You, dear Nicholas, have worked diligently all your life, just like your wife. You've given your daughter everything, but perhaps missed one crucial lesson: honesty and selflessness. What are you implying? My daughter is an honest girl. You're the one who deceived her, took her to fancy places, and showed off in expensive cars. Why do all this if you can't afford it? Why didn't you come clean with her from the start? I'm sure if she truly loved you, it wouldn't have mattered. You could have built a life together over time. How did we not see through your charade?" Nicholas's voice was filled with a mix of anger and disbelief. "No one questions your daughter's honesty. But why did she flee when she learned about my situation? I'm not a drug addict, a drunkard, or a criminal. I earn my living through honest work. Sure, the pay isn't huge, but it's enough to get by. And you know what? I'm done justifying myself. I loved your daughter sincerely, but today showed me that she doesn't love me. She cares about appearances and money, but not about me." The guests listened, trying to grasp the gravity of Adrian's words, still confused by the unfolding drama. Melanie's friends were particularly perplexed. Adrian had taken her to nice places and given her gifts, and now this. Had he suddenly lost his wealth, or had he been pretending all along? The questions hung in the air, unanswered. No one moved from the square near the registry office, as if waiting for a resolution that seemed increasingly unlikely. Adrian finally stood, ready to leave, but Melanie's aunt, in a bright, colorful dress, blocked his path. "Where do you think you're going? You can't just disgrace my niece and walk away. If you loved her, how could you let this happen? Look at all the guests, all the effort put into this day." Her voice rose to a scream. "And why don't you all ask Melanie why she's refusing to marry a working man? No benefit, so no marriage," Adrian retorted, his nerves fraying. "Is it wrong for a girl to want a better life? When children come, will she have to survive on a pittance during maternity leave? Is this calculation or reasonable planning? Did you lie to her about anything? Was she pretending to be someone she isn't?" Adrian wanted to respond but fell silent. Just then, his mother Caitlin approached, her demeanor calm and resolute. "You know, Adrian didn't want to disgrace his future wife. He fell in love deeply for the first time, and he's not to blame for what happened. Melanie is to blame." "What are you saying? Blaming Melanie?" Of course, a mother defends her son while blaming the daughter-in-law, Melanie's aunt countered, not backing down. "We saw Melanie with another man at a cafe a month ago," Caitlin continued, stunning Nicholas and silencing the angry woman. "We were there with friends. Melanie didn't notice us, but we overheard her telling the young man that she really loved him and was only marrying Adrian for his money. We couldn't keep this from our son." The guests were shocked into silence. No one had anticipated such a twist. Even Adrian seemed uneasy. He gently took his mother's arm, attempting to lead her away, but Caitlin stood her ground. "Adrian didn't speak to us for a week, then decided to marry Melanie anyway. We urged him to test her sincerity by revealing the truth about his financial status. We never imagined she would react like this, fleeing from her wedding. Doesn't this prove she doesn't love our son? She only wanted our money." The weight of Caitlin's revelation hung heavily in the air. The guests, once eager for a celebration, were now witnesses to a heart-wrenching spectacle of love, deception, and truth. Adrian, feeling both vindicated and sorrowful, looked at the people around him, each face a mirror of his inner turmoil. He had hoped for a different outcome, but the harsh reality of love's trials had laid bare the true nature of his relationship with Melanie. The day had indeed revealed more than just a marriage. It had exposed the very essence of what they both valued and believed in. "Come on, Mum, let's go," said Adrian, gently guiding his mother towards the car. The guests had begun to disperse, murmurs of confusion and shock filling the air. Melanie's father, Nicholas, stood in a daze, unable to process the events that had just unfolded. "How could I have raised such a daughter?" he muttered, feeling lost and disoriented. His family's reassurances and attempts to console him fell on deaf ears. Nicholas had cherished his daughter deeply and had envisioned a bright, joyful future for her. Now it seemed that vision had shattered beyond repair. 3 months had passed since that disastrous wedding day, and Melanie's family had undergone profound and heartbreaking changes. Nicholas had suffered a stroke, leaving the left side of his body paralyzed. The vibrant, hard-working man now spent most of his time confined to his bed. This tragic turn of events had thrown the family into turmoil. Vanessa, his wife, abandoned her duties at their store, hastily hiring a new manager to take over. Her days were now devoted solely to caring for her ailing husband. Melanie, meanwhile, was in the final stretch of her university studies, preparing for her last exams. The shadow of misfortune seemed to hang heavily over them. The family business began to suffer as well. Without Vanessa's warm and welcoming presence, loyal customers dwindled. Sales dropped significantly, and the once bustling store now struggled to stay afloat. Vanessa had to make difficult decisions, including letting 2 employees go. Only an elderly friend and a young woman of 25 remained to help, both juggling multiple roles just to keep the store running. The workload was overwhelming, and the future of the business looked grim. Nicholas, devastated by the collapse of his daughter's wedding and his subsequent health issues, started to give away money recklessly. He seemed desperate to prove his generosity and selflessness to everyone around him. However, when he needed support the most, the people he had helped were nowhere to be found. Vanessa was left to navigate this financial mess alone, pouring the last of their savings into Nicholas's rehabilitation. Some close relatives tried to help, but they had their own lives and struggles. The burden of caring for Nicholas fell squarely on Vanessa's shoulders. Melanie, having never shown much interest in the family business, was equally unprepared for this crisis. Her parents had always hoped she would pursue a prestigious career far removed from their struggles in the retail industry. But now, with her plans in tatters, she felt helpless and perhaps a bit unwilling to step up. She didn't know how to assist her parents and showed little desire to learn. The responsibilities of caring for her father and contributing to the family business seemed overwhelming and unappealing. Her once close-knit circle of friends had all but vanished. They had enjoyed her company when she was vibrant, carefree, and financially secure. Now, with her constant woes and lack of funds, they distanced themselves. Melanie began to play the role of a victim, feeling betrayed and humiliated. Gossip among her classmates was rampant. She thinks she's depressed and a victim, but in reality she wants to marry a rich guy and have an affair on the side. It backfired, and now everyone blames her for her father's stroke, they whispered. Sympathy was scarce, even from her family. Adrian, whom she expected to beg for forgiveness, remained silent, not answering her calls or messages. Her mother hadn't spoken to her in days. Finally, at the end of June, Melanie graduated from university. She returned home, diploma in hand, and collapsed onto her bed, reaching for her phone without a word. "Melanie, could you please go get some groceries?" her mother called from the other room, her voice weary and strained. "Don't you have anything else to say to me?" Melanie replied defiantly, her tone sharp and accusatory. Her mother sighed deeply, the weight of the past months evident in her voice. "What do you want me to say, Melanie? That everything will be okay? That this nightmare end? We're all trying to cope here. Please just help out a little." Melanie felt a pang of guilt, but couldn't shake her sense of injustice. She had envisioned a life so different, and now it felt like everything was crumbling around her. She got up slowly, grabbed her bag, and headed out to get the groceries, each step feeling heavier than the last. The world outside seemed indifferent to her plight, the everyday bustle of life continuing unabated. Melanie couldn't help but wonder how everything had gone so wrong, and if there was any way to reclaim the future she had once so vividly imagined. "Melanie, it's been 2 days since we've had any milk or bread in the house." "So does that mean bread is more important to you than your own daughter's graduation?" Melanie retorted, her voice dripping with disbelief. Just a short while ago, things were so different. Her mother emerged from the room, looking deathly pale. You know, daughter, I didn't realize what a horrible person I raised. It's agonizing to accept that you're my child. Did you just call me a terrible person? Are you out of your mind? I just graduated and received my diploma. Why am I being sent to run errands instead of receiving congratulations? You're almost 23 years old, yet you still think like a child. Your father and I made a colossal mistake by spoiling you and planning your wedding. So now you're going to blame me for Adrian leaving me. Melanie's voice cracked with frustration. Yes, and not just for that, her mother replied quietly, careful not to wake her sleeping husband. Your behavior led your father to have a stroke and me to nearly have a heart attack. You started an affair knowing you were about to get married. Mum, I've explained everything to you. I had no romantic relationship with that guy. We just met for business purposes. I couldn't have known Adrian's parents would be there. I've told you 1,000 times. I didn't confess any love to that man. I don't understand why Caitlin told Dad otherwise and why you believed her over me. The guy messaged me on Instagram asking for advice on furniture selection since I'm a beginner designer. I agreed to meet him for the experience. We met, I gave him some tips, and he invited me to our student cafe as a thank you. We drank coffee and talked. He started flirting, and I told him I was getting married soon to set boundaries. He asked me if I could ever love him, and I said no. When I was about to leave, he asked if I could pay for myself. I told him. Why invite a girl out if you can't pay? He tried to justify himself, saying, why is money so important to girls? Is it the most important thing in life? I told him yes, money is important to me, and my fiancé is wealthy, which is why I chose him. Why has money become your top priority? Melanie's mother asked, her voice filled with sorrow. Melanie, we didn't raise you in poverty. You had everything you wanted. Mom, you're being unreasonable, Melanie replied, her frustration evident. But money means freedom. Yes, it can't buy everything, but a good income allows me to work and live on my terms, not like you and Daddy. You've worked tirelessly in your store from dawn till dusk. If we had been better off financially, Dad wouldn't have been so stressed about the money we spent on that damn wedding. Vanessa wanted to lash out at her daughter's words, but instead found herself eerily calm. Your father didn't have a stroke because we spent a lot on the wedding. He was devastated to realize how selfish and two-faced his daughter had become. Wow. So now you're accusing me again, Melanie exclaimed, her voice rising. At least I was honest with Adrian. He lied to me about being rich or poor. A decent person wouldn't deceive like that. I value myself too much to marry a liar and a clown. So maybe you should rethink who's two-faced and self-serving. Enough, Vanessa said sternly. I won't coddle you anymore. Tomorrow morning we're going to the store, and you'll work as a substitute salesperson until we make a good profit. Me, a salesperson? I don't know how to do that. Have you ever asked for my opinion? Melanie protested, her voice filled with incredulity. I didn't ask and I won't ask. You haven't bothered to ask how much it costs to rehabilitate your father over these 2 months, how I pay the salespeople, how I manage everything. You only think about yourself. Vanessa placed her money on the table and left the room. Melanie, overwhelmed with emotion, went to the nearby grocery store. Tears streamed down her face as she imagined herself working as a salesperson, eating a simple sandwich for lunch, and gossiping with other employees. It felt like the end of her young, beautiful life, and she feared she'd have to forget about her interior design career forever. Who would hire her as a recent graduate with average grades for such a serious and creative job? She needed experience, but she couldn't work for free, and she wouldn't earn decent money immediately. The next day, Melanie and her mother headed to the store, leaving Aunt Polly at home to watch over Melanie's recovering father. The store, situated at the intersection of 2 busy streets, had managed to stay open despite the competition. The customers appreciated the quality and variety of goods, but it was challenging to compete with the nearby shopping center. The center's generous department sold low-quality clothes at cheaper prices, making them highly sought after. As they entered the store, Melanie felt a wave of despair wash over her. She couldn't fathom a future spent behind a counter, dealing with customers all day. Her dreams of becoming a renowned interior designer seemed to slip further away with each passing moment. Yet, deep down, she knew she had to face this new reality, no matter how painful it was. Then, during a crucial family meeting, the decision was made to implement a discount system for regular customers and explore other marketing strategies. "Hello, Vanessa, it's wonderful to see you," greeted Rebecca, the hostess and a dedicated salesperson in their shop. "Hi, Rebecca. I've brought you a recruit," Vanessa pointed at Melanie. "Rebecca, I have only one request. Treat Melanie not as my daughter, but as an ordinary trainee here to learn everything." "Of course, we'll teach her everything she needs to know," Rebecca replied with a warm smile. "Vanessa, while you're here, let me inform you that we quickly sold all the old stock, but the new items are less popular. The fabric is natural wool, but it's a grayish color, a bit faded. Customers aren't fond of it. We haven't sold a single suit this week. Everyone's asking for classic dark gray or black. You should negotiate with the supplier and order more pants and suits, since they're in high demand." Melanie listened in dismay to her mother's conversation with the salesperson. What does it matter what size or wool fabric it is? She had studied fabric types and color combinations as a designer, but working in a sterile environment and meeting clients occasionally was vastly different from trying to satisfy customers daily. She remembered feeling deeply uncomfortable when her parents, usually distant and reserved, turned into overly attentive and caring shopkeepers. Customers left happy, but her parents would return home and barely speak to each other. During lunch, Greta shared her thoughts with Melanie. "I enjoy working here. I have immense respect for your mother, so I didn't leave when the other salespeople did. Not many store owners would sell their jewelry to pay their employees." "My mom is quite an extraordinary woman," Melanie said quietly, feeling a lump in her throat. "She never mentioned selling her jewelry. Why do I always learn these things from others? I didn't even notice she wasn't wearing her earrings or ring. I'm such a terrible daughter. I can't learn properly, earn money, or even get married." From that day forward, Melanie didn't just work part-time at the family store, she gave it her all. She worked closely with Greta for several days, and with Rebecca for several more, taking only one day off each week. Melanie served customers, sorted and steamed clothes in the warehouse, dressed mannequins, and monitored the size grid of the most popular models. Most importantly, she took on the responsibility of promoting the store online, a task her mother had handled alone. Despite her lack of knowledge in marketing or PR, Melanie's determination to restore the family business was stronger than her doubts. She began actively maintaining the store's social media pages, posting photos of clothing, describing product features, and responding to customer inquiries. Vanessa saw how hard her daughter was trying, how politely she interacted with customers, and how she grasped the intricacies of working the cash register. Despite the recent hardships their family had faced, Vanessa found joy in Melanie's delayed maturity. Melanie no longer sent countless voice messages to friends, endlessly scrolled through news feeds, or scoffed at every request. She spent her only day off with her father, showing a newfound sense of responsibility. Vanessa regretted pushing Melanie into a hasty marriage and not allowing her to date and get to know her fiancé's family. At the time, the marriage seemed like the perfect solution to make Melanie more serious and responsible. She had hoped that family responsibilities and eventually children would ground her. How wrong she was, thinking someone else could fix her daughter. Only Melanie could change herself or be changed by circumstances. Several more months passed, and Nicholas began to regain feeling in the left side of his body. Full recovery was still far off, But this progress brought immense happiness to Melanie's family. The efforts of the doctors in Vanessa's care were paying off. Yet, Vanessa couldn't help but wonder if Melanie would have matured this much without the family's recent troubles. One Monday morning, Melanie and Greta were working in the store. The day started slowly, with no customers yet. The girls were selecting outfits for the mannequins and laughing. "Hello, girls," an elderly woman entered the store and smiled warmly. "Hello," the salespeople greeted her in unison. "It's great that you open at 9. I've had insomnia for several nights now. I wake up at 5 in the morning and don't know what to do with myself. I decided to take a walk, find what I need, and calm down. What can we help you with today? A blouse, a dress, or perhaps a warm cardigan?" Greta approached the customer with a friendly demeanor. "I have a particular need. I need to find a dress for a wedding, size XXL. I looked around yesterday at the neighboring shopping center." The woman nodded towards the nearby mall, "but they only offered me dark colors. Could you tell us what dress styles you usually prefer? What would you like to highlight, and what would you rather conceal?" The elderly woman laughed. "Oh, at your age you should flaunt everything. You're young and slim, but at my age it's better to cover up. I want something light and pleasant. After all, it's my only grandson's wedding. If you can find me a dress with a light wrap, I'll be delighted." Melanie listened intently, ready to assist. She realized that working in the store wasn't just about selling clothes, it was about helping people feel good about themselves. This was a chance to use her design skills in a new way, one that connected deeply with her desire to make a positive impact on others' lives. The saleswoman meticulously showed the elderly woman all the elegant dresses in the store that fit her size. The shopper examined everything with great interest, appreciating the variety. Sensing that the decision-making process would be lengthy, Melanie decided to engage her in a light conversation. "So, your grandson's wedding is approaching. Is the bride lovely?" Melanie asked. "Not quite yet, still 3 weeks to go, but I like to be prepared in advance. My grandson's name is Adrian. As for the bride, I haven't met her yet. I just arrived 3 days ago. I live far away, and my son bought me a plane ticket. He said, 'Mom, you'll celebrate your grandson's wedding and stay with us for a month, so here I am.'" The woman tried on all the dresses but couldn't decide which one suited her best. "Girls, I've probably taken up too much of your time. I apologize. I haven't bought anything for myself in ages. There's rarely any occasion to dress up in old age. My son told me the wedding would be a grand affair. The bride comes from a very wealthy family." "We're not rushing you at all," Melanie reassured her with a smile. "It's good that the bride is well off. There will be fewer problems in married life." "Oh, my dear, money is not always a guarantee of a happy marriage. My son used to be a calm and reasonable man. But now he's always on edge. His wife drains him for a luxurious lifestyle. Caitlin loves expensive resorts and high-end clothes. But at least my grandson is a decent young man. He helps his father in the business and does his best." As the elderly woman finally decided on a dress, a pink one that refreshed her complexion and felt pleasant to the touch, Melanie felt an overwhelming ache and tears welled up in her eyes. "Are you feeling okay?" the elderly woman asked, looking at her with concern. Melanie couldn't hold back her tears any longer and quietly sobbed. "I'm sorry, I'm just tired." "Don't cry, dear. You'll have your own celebration in life, and you'll get married," the woman comforted her gently. "You know, I was supposed to have a wedding, but it fell apart because of me," Melanie continued to sob. The woman took Melanie's hand and spoke softly. "Don't cry. Let's process my purchase now, and then we can go outside, and you can tell me everything." 10 minutes later, Melanie found herself pouring her heart out to Adrian's grandmother. She recounted the unfortunate day, her father's stroke, her mother's tireless care for him, and her struggles working in the store to support her family. "My dear, to say I'm shocked is an understatement, Mrs. Sullivan said, her voice filled with sympathy. "I am very sorry about your father, but tell me honestly, did you cheat on Adrian?" "No, of course not," Melanie replied desperately. "I'm not telling you this to get Adrian back. It's too late for that, he's getting married. I'm just devastated that I was slandered in front of my relatives, friends, and my father, who couldn't bear such shame. My parents always thought I was not serious. And I couldn't convince them otherwise. It was just a ridiculous coincidence. I agreed to meet a man who needed my design advice. I didn't see anything wrong with that. Why would I go to the most popular cafe in our city if I were trying to hide something before my wedding?" "What's the cafe called, Mrs. Sullivan asked. "It's called Pizza. It opened a year ago, serves delicious food, and the prices are reasonable. We call it the Student Cafe because it's always full of students." "Melanie, do you still love Adrian, Mrs. Sullivan unexpectedly shifted the conversation. "I think I do, but my understanding of love has changed. I know you'll ask why I ran away from the wedding if I loved him. You see, I was preparing for a happy married life with the man I loved. I liked that Adrian was wealthy. I thought marrying him would make me financially independent of my parents, allowing me to live freely. Before my father's stroke, we had no money problems, but my parents always talked about working hard to become a true professional and live without worries. Now I realize they were right, but back then, I imagined spending half my life achieving that while there were so many interesting and new things around me. Your grandson came to the wedding looking like a jester, claiming he was broke and that we would live on his taxi driver's salary. I didn't expect such a turn of events. I had bragged about my smart, handsome, and wealthy fiancé, and then this happened. I understand that in your eyes. I might seem like a foolish, selfish person wanting to settle better in life. Let it be that way, but I'm just exhausted. So many thoughts are racing through your mind, Melanie. But believe me, the most important thing is that you've realized your problem. We all make mistakes. My son Brandon, a successful entrepreneur and a self-sufficient man, is under his wife's thumb. He didn't tell me anything about this story, but you know, Melanie, our conversation isn't over yet. Let's meet tomorrow morning. I think my legs led me to your store for a reason, Mrs. Sullivan said kindly. Melanie bid farewell to Adrian's grandmother and returned to her work, feeling an unprecedented relief wash over her soul. Suddenly, someone called her name. A handsome stranger had pulled his car too close to the sidewalk and motioned for Melanie to join him in the front seat. Ignoring him, she continued on her way. But the stranger quickly got out of his car and ran up to her. "Hey Melanie, do you remember me?" he asked. "Hello, no, I don't remember you." "What do you want?" Melanie replied curtly. "Wow, calm down. Why so gloomy in the morning? I just came to talk to you. I'm one of Adrian's friends. My name is Marcus. I missed your wedding. Adrian told me everything that had happened. I've been messaging you on social media, but you haven't responded. So I had to catch you in person. Do you know that Adrian is getting married soon?" "I'm happy for him," Melanie answered indifferently. "But he doesn't love his fiancée. His mother is forcing him into this marriage. His father's business is struggling, and Crystal is the daughter of an influential figure in our administration. He seemed to like her initially because she was pretty, but after spending some time together, he realized they had nothing in common. He regrets agreeing to this wedding. Well, there's nothing I can do to help. Let him go through the same ordeal with her as he did with me, and maybe she'll break it off on her own," Melanie retorted. "Melanie, I'm serious. You need to tell Adrian that you still love him, and there will be no wedding. He's trapping himself in a miserable situation, and I just want to save him." Marcus, why do you think I still love him and should rescue him from such a lucrative match? Do you think I would trust either of you, especially Adrian, after the stunt he pulled at our wedding? This isn't a joke, Marcus. Goodbye." Melanie turned and walked briskly towards the store. "Melanie," Marcus shouted after her. "Do you even know how much Adrian is suffering because of what happened? He's too proud to call you himself. He knows he's to blame." "A man is the master of his destiny," Melanie declared loudly, the first phrase that came to her mind and quickened her pace. Meanwhile, at home, Mrs. Sullivan was sitting in the spacious kitchen, spreading butter on a piece of bread. "Caitlin, dear, could you make me some tea? I feel like having a drink." "Of course I will. But it's wonderful that you're asking for help. You usually do everything yourself," Caitlin responded. "Caitlin, sometimes I just want to be taken care of, like in a cafe. There aren't many places like that in my small town." "So what's stopping you from going to a cafe or restaurant? Brandon and I often go to such places." "Yes, you're probably right. A woman living across the street recommended a cafe called Just Pizza. She said it's tasty and cheap. Do you think it's worth going there?" I'm shocked by such advice. It's a youth cafe. There's always noise, and the staff is rude. Not. Have you been there, Caitlin? I've been there once. Thanks for the advice, dear. I'm going for a walk now, Mrs. Sullivan said, getting up. Mum, where are you going? Brandon asked as he saw his mother leaving. Yes, Sonny, I am. Could you drive me? It's nearby, she replied. Under his wife's watchful eye, Brandon and his mother left the apartment. Mom, I'm starving. I was planning to have lunch at home, Brandon said, clearly nervous. Don't worry, son. You'll eat in 10 minutes. I came up with an excuse to talk to you face to face for once. Let's sit on that bench over there. I know what this is, Mom. As a former senior investigator, you're going to interrogate me. I used to joke about that, but now it's serious. The future of your only son and my only grandchild depends on it. So tell me, why did you ruin Adrian and Melanie's wedding? What are you talking about, Mom? You know that Melanie refused to marry Adrian when he told her he was poor and worked as a taxi driver, Brandon replied, exasperated. But that's not all. She was also flirting with a stranger before the wedding. We saw and heard everything. And why did you and Caitlin, who frequent expensive restaurants, decide to go to such a cheap youth cafe? I was really surprised you chose that place, but I didn't say anything. And what a coincidence, you found 2 free tables in a crowded cafe. Yes, Mom, we saved our son from that deceitful girl. And now he's marrying a good girl from a respectable and affluent family. I'm pleased to be related to her father. Hey, Mrs. Sullivan sighed deeply, looking into her son's eyes. Brandon, sometimes what we see isn't the whole truth. Be careful about forcing Adrian into a life he doesn't want. Happiness isn't built on wealth alone. It's time we reconsidered our choices for the sake of everyone involved. Brandon, why do you constantly carry such a heavy burden of worry and stress? Your mother is still alive, and your son is about to marry a wonderful girl, yet you're always on edge. Tell me the real reason behind this. All right, if you truly want to know, here it is. I poured a significant amount of money into a business venture and ended up losing it all. We barely have enough funds to cover our debts, and with the wedding approaching, everything feels overwhelmingly difficult. Why did you decide to give your son such an extravagant wedding during these tough times and increase your debt? Wouldn't Adrian have understood your financial situation? No, Mom. Caitlin believes that having a lavish wedding will ensure Nicholas, Crystal's father, respects us more in the future. Don't sacrifice your well-being or your son's future for this. It will only lead to heartache. It's time to break free from Caitlin's manipulative grip. By the way, I ran into Melanie yesterday. She's working at her parents' store as a salesperson. I have a good sense of people, and I can tell you she's a sincere girl who just lost her way a bit. Well, Mom, I don't even want to hear it, Brandon said, ready to leave. Wait, she explained why she reacted that way and ran off. If your father had surprised me like that, I'd have at least hit him with a frying pan. Besides, Melanie's father is just starting to recover from the stroke he suffered because of your mess. If you're saving money, think about a prenuptial agreement instead of this extravagant show. I heard Melanie's father is in poor health, and I am genuinely sorry. But Adrian offered him financial help, and he refused. We thought it would be a valuable lesson for our son to see who stands by you for love and not for money. Maybe you should reconsider testing Caitlin in such a manner. Yesterday I saw a check fall out of her purse. She bought herself another expensive leather coat. Now I understand why you're having financial issues. That amount could sustain me for half a year. Mom, let's end this conversation. Stop accusing us. Adrian's wedding will still go ahead as planned. He's busy getting everything ready for the celebration. Yes, I see he's so busy that he's turned pale sitting in front of his laptop, not even taking time to eat. Mom, he's an IT specialist. That's why he's always on his computer. Fine, do what you think is best. Go eat something. We'll talk tonight. After Brandon left, Mrs. Sullivan called a taxi and went straight to the store to meet Melanie. She confided in the girl about her suspicions and persuaded her to meet Adrian once more, as Caitlin claimed Melanie had confessed her love to him. Melanie was initially reluctant, but Adrian's grandmother convinced her that this meeting could reveal a serious moral issue affecting the Sullivan family's future, and perhaps Melanie's future depended on whether Adrian agreed to meet. Although Mrs. Sullivan's ideas initially seemed somewhat absurd to Melanie, after an hour of engaging in conversation with the charming investigator, her doubts completely dissipated. Mrs. Sullivan's keen insight and persuasive manner reassured Melanie, who then agreed to the plan. Later, when Melanie called to confirm that the meeting with the necessary individual was scheduled, Mrs. Sullivan promptly gathered Brandon, Caitlin, and Adrian in the living room. My dear ones, tomorrow marks exactly 45 years since I started working in the police force. That's why I want to invite you all to a special dinner at a lovely restaurant to celebrate this milestone, she announced with a warm smile. At the appointed hour, the whole family was seated around a cozy table in an elegant cafe, enjoying an array of delicious dishes. The ambience was intimate, with only a few other patrons scattered around the restaurant. The conversation at the table flowed like a gentle stream. Mrs. Sullivan regaled Adrian with nostalgic stories about Brandon's childhood, his favorite hobbies, and his endearing quirks. Naturally, she also wove in some captivating anecdotes from her career as an investigator in their hometown, adding a touch of intrigue to the evening. After consuming several glasses of wine, Caitlin suddenly asked her mother-in-law, "Tell me, where did you get the money for this restaurant? It's a very exquisite and expensive place. Don't be offended, I'm just curious." Mrs. Sullivan responded with dignity, her composure unshaken despite the pointed question. "Not at all embarrassed, unlike my son and grandson. Don't worry, Caitlin dear, we're spending my hard-earned money. I have a good pension, and thanks to my son's regular financial help, I've saved a decent sum in the bank. This money will be enough for Brandon to pay off his debt, and for Adrian not to marry a girl he doesn't love, whom you picked out for him." Adrian almost choked on his cocktail upon hearing those words. He had only shared his doubts about the impending marriage with a close friend. How could his grandmother know all this? Brandon was stunned by his mother's forthrightness and didn't know what to say. Caitlin was breathing heavily, clearly agitated, and ready to launch into a verbal battle. I've been on this earth for many years, and I immediately realized that someone was pressuring my son and Adrian. Some people like to solve their problems at the expense of others. But that's not your option, grandson. I'm sure you're an honest person, but you're under the influence of your mother, who doesn't deny herself the luxury of buying yet another extravagant coat while there are pressing issues within the family. How dare you speak to me like that? Caitlin stood up abruptly, her face flushed with anger, and threw her crumpled napkin on the table. Sit down and calm yourself. Melanie, come here, Mrs. Sullivan commanded with a tone of authority. To everyone's surprise, Melanie appeared, accompanied by an unknown man. I invited some guests to our wonderful celebration, Mrs. Sullivan continued, her voice steady and calm. A celebration of truth, honesty, and justice. Caitlin, don't you want to tell us how you orchestrated the meeting between this young man and Melanie, how you reserved 2 tables, and how you manipulated Brandon into coming here? Caitlin glared at her mother-in-law and the young man, her eyes darting nervously. She seemed ready to make a desperate move. Adrian stared at Melanie intently, a whirlwind of emotions surging within him. He felt a deep sense of shame. How could he have been so gullible, so easily swayed by his mother's words, and become entangled in this deceitful plot? Unexpectedly, the unknown young man spoke up first. I'm very sorry this happened, he said, his voice tinged with regret, as he looked at Adrian and Brandon with sorrowful eyes. I just needed money. And then Caitlin suggested I could earn some extra cash by provoking emotions and extracting certain words from Melanie. I would never have come here and kept this a secret if Melanie hadn't told me that her father suffered a stroke after the shock at the wedding. Please forgive me. The young man's voice wavered as he lowered his gaze to the floor before quietly exiting the cafe. The room fell silent, the weight of the revelation hanging heavily in the air. Adrian's heart pounded in his chest as he grappled with the reality of the situation. He felt a mixture of anger, betrayal, and sadness. Brandon, too, was lost for words, his mind reeling from the shock of his mother's revelations and the young man's confession. Mrs. Sullivan broke the silence, her voice filled with resolve. Adrian, I hope you understand now the gravity of the situation. You deserve to marry someone you truly love, someone who loves you for who you are, not for your family's wealth. And Brandon, you must realize that sometimes tough love and honesty are necessary to protect those we care about. Tears welled up in Adrian's eyes as he nodded slowly, understanding the depth of his grandmother's wisdom and love. He looked at Melanie, who stood there, her face a picture of vulnerability and sincerity. He realized that despite the turmoil and deceit, there was still a chance for genuine love and happiness. Caitlin, on the other hand, sat back down, her anger giving way to a begrudging silence. She knew she had been outmaneuvered by Mrs. Sullivan's shrewdness and moral fortitude. The truth had been laid bare, and there was no escaping it. As the evening drew to a close, Mrs. Sullivan stood up, her eyes filled with both sorrow and hope. Let this night be a lesson for all of us. Let's strive to build our lives on a foundation of truth, love, and integrity. That's the legacy I want to leave behind. With that, the family slowly began to mend the fractures in their relationships, guided by Mrs. Sullivan's unwavering wisdom and the hard-earned lesson of that unforgettable night. Melanie stood silently behind Mrs. Sullivan, tears streaming down her face. But why? Brandon's loud voice shattered the prolonged silence. Why did you lie to everyone, Caitlin? Why did you convince us all that our son's bride was a traitor? And when Adrian didn't believe it, you suggested such a vile way of testing. How could I have gone along with this nonsense? I don't want to see you anymore. Wait, don't jump to conclusions, Melanie exclaimed, rushing to the table as if struck by lightning. Don't argue because of me. I'm not worthy of such sacrifice. Adrian, I'm sorry I didn't appreciate you as I should have. I just didn't expect such a test on my wedding day. She wiped away her tears and headed for the exit. Adrian immediately jumped up from the table and ran after her. Forgive me, Melanie, for my father, for falling for my mother's lies about you like a fool. Let's go talk. Melanie and Adrian left the cafe, leaving Brandon, his mother, and Caitlin sitting at the table in stunned silence. In the typical fashion, I was supposed to buy plane tickets and leave immediately. However, since I live far away, please bear with me for a couple more weeks. I swear that I don't want to be the cause of your family's breakdown. You may hate me and curse me however you want. It's your right. But please understand, feelings and people's destinies aren't a joke. And I'm not just talking about Melanie and Adrian. What about Crystal, who believes she is loved and will be made happy? Brandon, I didn't want to tell you, but maybe the time has come, Mrs. Sullivan began, her voice trembling with emotion. I loved your father very much, but he didn't love me back. Not because I was bad or he was bad. It was for an entirely different reason. Our parents didn't allow him to marry the girl he was deeply in love with, and out of spite, he hastily married me. I was the happiest person on earth when I got married. I rejoiced, dreamed, eagerly anticipated your birth. Your father physically lived with me, but until his death, he thought of that girl. You can't imagine how painful it is to feel all your life that you're not the one and only, but just a good mother and wife. That's why I often stayed at work, tried to forget, received diplomas and titles, but couldn't get the most important thing: reciprocated love. So please forgive me, son, if I couldn't give you enough motherly love. Mrs. Sullivan tightly squeezed her son's hand and sighed heavily. Mum, why have you told me all this now? There was no reason then, but now the time has come. I'm sorry. I've completely lost control of myself, Caitlin exclaimed, tears flowing down her cheeks. Everything will be fine, Mrs. Sullivan assured them, taking Brandon and Caitlin's hands and joining them together. The waiter approached the table, ready to ask for the bill, when a tall figure of Adrian appeared behind him. I have 2 pieces of news for you, dear parents. Grandma, pardon the senior investigator for hard cases. Let me start with the good news. My carefully chosen bride, Crystal, is leaving to study in London. As a result, the wedding is cancelled by her wish. The second news is even better. Melanie and I want to get married again, this time for sure. I clarify, precisely get married, not have an outrageously expensive wedding. Who's in favor? Raise your hand. Brandon, Caitlin, and Mrs. Sullivan raised both hands without a word and laughed out loud. Finally, there was complete mutual understanding in their home. The air was filled with a sense of relief and new beginnings as the family came together, ready to support one another with love and sincerity. As the laughter died down, Brandon turned to his mother with a newfound respect and gratitude. Mum, thank you for everything. For your wisdom, for your love, and for always looking out for us, even when we didn't see it. Mrs. Sullivan smiled warmly, her heart full. Family is everything, Brandon, and it's never too late to make things right. Let's move forward with honesty and love, and we'll get through anything together. Adrian, holding Melanie's hand tightly, nodded in agreement. We'll have a small, meaningful wedding, surrounded by those who truly care about us. That's all that matters. Caitlin, wiping away the last of her tears, finally spoke up. I'm so sorry for the pain I've caused. I see now how wrong I was. From now on, I'll do my best to support and love this family without causing harm. The family embraced, their bond stronger than ever. They had faced a tumultuous journey, but with truth and love as their foundation, they were ready to build a brighter future together. Thank you for watching this incredible story of the rich groom's unique test of his bride's true intentions. What did you learn from this emotional journey? How do you think this lesson on trust and authenticity can be applied to your own life? Share one insight or practice you've gained from this video in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiring content. Your support helps us bring more meaningful stories and messages to you.